So I guess talking about the building code and the way that it affects the space allocation, like one thing I know people are always talking about, is like, oh, you see these bathrooms, like if you're running around Bushwick or Bed-Stuy and you see some of these newer developments,
Yeah.
like a lot of them, like I was helping a client, it was like a 1-bedroom place in Bushwick, a nice building. But the apartment was small and there was like, not enough closet space, but that was not the thing. But when you got to the bathroom, it was actually really nice because it was spacious, because it had to be because it was I think it was an ADA compliant bathroom,
Yes.
or that's the way I refer
Yes.
to it, right?
Yes. Which is perfect.
Yeah. And they were explaining, they were like, oh, look, it was funny. They had a toilet, then they had a lot of space, and then they had a little vanity, and they could have like done a double vanity or something if they wanted to, and then a tub, and and the thing was, it didn't make sense to me, the way they had put it in there, and the way the agent had explained it. It was like, oh, look, we're doing it so it's ADA compliant, but you can always like change it and add like a bigger vanity or whatever it is, once you're in there. And
Yes,
can you
exactly.
talk about that in terms of like the
Yes.
space?
Yes, exactly. Depending on if it's a brand new building or it's an existing building and you're renovating, the code references not necessarily ADEC, because ADEC is for public spaces, but it references ANSI 117, okay, which talks about accessibility and barrier free. So if you have a bathroom in a building and the building has to meet certain minimum requirements, and if you're in a type A, type B, or accessible unit, okay, which is a longer discussion, okay, you have to make the bathroom accessible, okay? So if it's completely renovated and you don't know who is going to move into that apartment, you have to make sure that that bathroom from day one is accessible, or in a matter of 10 days, with simple hand tools, literally a hammer and a screwdriver, you can retrofit so it's accessible. So the space between,
I would imagine nobody would then design it to not be accessible and then have to be like, I can't imagine how you would make something with simple hand tools suddenly accessible that was not before.
Right. So exactly. Like, so for example, the one bathroom I'm working on right now, it's for an existing owner, right? But eventually when they sell, the vanity has to be able to, so that it could be removed, or the base cabinet underneath can be pulled out, but the sink top remains in place and there's clearance underneath for a wheelchair to roll in. For example, if you're doing complete gutter renovation, you want to put blocking in the wall so that maybe if you had to put in a grab bar, there's enough support in the wall to take the grab bar, okay? So these are the things that you want to prepare yourself for the future. Or again, if it's an apartment, you don't know who you're going to be renting out to or selling to, you have to make these preparations. So that's very, very general. It's very general overview. You have to really dig into the code to say exactly what is required and when it is required. But that toilet next to the vanity, there's a minimum of 18 inches from the center of the toilet to the vanity, right? That's on both sides, 15 to 18 inches. That's why. Now, if somebody moves in, right, and they're going to be there for a while, they can put in a brand new vanity, right? So that it works for them, okay? And if they're not accessible needs, they can do that. But as soon as they move out, the landlord or the owner who sells it has to make it so that they can make that change very easily. Okay. Yeah.
So I would imagine that probably what happens a lot is people will make changes. They won't make the change back, like on selling.
Right.
And it becomes an issue only when you're, somebody else.
And exactly. Even with brand new buildings, if the architect or the designer or the whoever, they don't do it right from day one, there could be a lot of legal issues. There was an apartment building in New York City. There was about 125 units. And the bathroom, because between the hallway floor and the bathroom floor was an inch. It was raised by an inch, right? They had to go in and chop out all the bathroom floors to reduce it a half an inch.
Wow.
Right. And, it was because a certain demographic found out about this and they sued the building. Okay. So these are really critical elements that people have to think about in a brand new design or a mass renovation design. So those are very key elements. And those affect your space.
Let me ask you a question. Maybe you know the answer to this too. So along these lines,
Yes.
I have talked to different people about, condoing out, like taking like a 4-family or a 3-family, townhouse, and then condoing it out and selling, instead of like, selling them individually, the units.
Yeah.
And what I've, like a lot of those, a lot of these townhouses obviously are like pre-war townhouses. There's a lot of, I've heard that you have to, is it true that you would have to, in order to do that, you would automatically have to make sure that the bathrooms are ADA compliant at that point? What if they're not big enough to begin with because they're a pre-war bathroom? How does that work?
Yeah, so that becomes very tricky. And this is, again, where you need to really look and dig into the code, okay? So my general understanding is, say, any structure that has more than 2 units, so 3 units or more, okay, the accessibility requirements kick in, okay? So that means, let's say, for easy math, if you have a 4-unit apartment building, right? If I understand it and I read it correctly, one of those units has to be accessible, right? So obviously the first one you want to do is obviously on the ground floor, because you want to be, it might be the easiest to get into, okay? You have to make a lot of provisions as best as you can to accommodate that person in a wheelchair. So that might require, you have to rip out and redo the entire floor plate to accommodate a larger bathroom. And that becomes challenging. Where the upper floors, they don't have to, but you will have to make accommodations, like, for example, the kitchen sink. You want to be able so that the vanity, the sink, the cabinet underneath can be pulled out. But there's a percentage requirement on the number of units that have to be 100% accessible. So that becomes a challenge with existing like brownstones or townhouses or tenement apartment buildings that have multiple units. So if you have a developer who wants to buy one, they have to really look at what the code says about accessibility, how and when it has to be done. So, and that could be a cost factor. Also, if you renovate to a certain point, if you don't do anything to those units, if you don't touch them, you buy them and you don't touch them and you sell them, you're not doing anything. So therefore you don't have to be compliant because you're not doing anything. But as soon as you start doing any changes, you start getting involved.
When you say changes, you mean like it's not like cosmetic changes, but changes like to walls, to plumbing, to electrical.
Yeah. As soon as you start doing things that would trigger a building permit, that's when they start looking at these things. And then you have to be very, very careful on what you want to do. If it's, 4 tenants were in there, they all move out, and now you convert it to a condo, but you don't touch anything, that's fine.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm
assuming. But again, you have to look at what the building code says.
I'm assuming that the people that would be most interested in this conversation are all planning on buying something and then doing renovations minimally, if not building a brand new structure.
Yes.
But that's I did not know that. It's interesting. Like I was under the impression that if you just in the process of condoing things out, of turning a multifamily into a condo building, that they might have to then redo bathrooms and stuff to make them ADA.
Yes, it's a matter of how much you do and when you do it. But again, I'm just generalizing it. I've done it a couple times, but every time I do it, the first thing I do is I do a code analysis, and I reread it, and I have to look at it again, and then I have to make sure, okay, since I did this in this building, I got to go back and check out all the local laws that may have changed the code. So That's why every architect and engineer always does a code analysis every time they do work on a new project, just to make sure they get it right.
I think that we had been talking before, and I think that I found it very interesting that this was the when you look at the inside of a lot of different apartment buildings, like I do, a lot of different apartments, and you see the difference in sort of the pre-war buildings, the layouts, the original floor plans of the Rosario Candelas of the world, and like the and then you look at the mid-century co-ops that are all over the Upper East Side and the downtown and stuff, and the floor plans that you had there in the early, like late 50s, early 60s, and then how the character of the buildings, the layouts, tend to change just based on the era that it was built in.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, for example, I'll give you a quick example. If you look at a building that was probably built pre-war, right, you'll notice that the kitchens are tiny. They're very, very small, right? But the living room and the bedrooms and the kitchen and the bathrooms, and the main bathrooms, they're pretty decent size, right? They're manageable and they're human scale, but the kitchens were small, right? You get to the 68 code is actually the first time when the 68 code talks about space allocation for accessibility, believe it or not. Kitchens got bigger, but living spaces like the bedrooms and the living rooms got smaller. It was a trade-off. So it's, if you look at, like I said before in the beginning, the code has an impact on the way buildings look and how the floor plates look and all that stuff. It's really interesting. Yeah.
If I were to generalize, I would have to say that sort of when you're at the entry level buyer condo, like in, Brooklyn or Queens right now, like, the code seems to be pushing bigger bathrooms, and you can't make the bedrooms too much smaller. So I think a lot of that comes out of closet space and like living space.
Yes, exactly.
I never knew that. I always wondered. It's like, so I see so many developments where there's so little closet space. I was like, come on, guys, really? Like, you can't add but like it starts to really make sense in terms of like they have a certain amount of space that they can allocate to the apartment, and they have to allocate a certain amount of space to a bathroom.
Yeah. But I just want to reemphasize, I'm giving a very general overview. Whatever it is you want, every single building is unique. You have to take that specific spot, where it is, the age of the building, what the existing conditions are, and look at the code and see how your layout and what you're trying to do is affected, or how the code affects that structure. Very, very important. And that's why it's very important to hire architects, engineers, and sometimes you have to hire people that are just strictly zoning professionals. That's all they do. That's all they do.
Yep. My takeaway from this, Jens, thank you, is that we need to consult with you prior to the acquisition, right?
Yes.
In the planning for the acquisition, we kind of need to, consult, the developer needs to consult with you, because you got to sort of know what you're getting in at just before you even buy the lot or the building or whatever it is that you plan on converting, knocking down, or developing.
That's right. Exactly. So, yep.
Well, thank you. I think I have the feeling we could probably talk about this for another hour or two.
Oh, right? Yeah. Don't get me started.
But this is a great little primer and some great points. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Let's do it again, and we'll dig into another aspect of it.
All right. Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Good chatting.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.